Okay, so this is the continuation of the SharePoint Development Framework Challenge. Uh, in this video, we're actually going to walk through Release Candidate 0. The Release Candidate 0 at the time this video was released a few weeks ago. There seems to be some major changes outside of some simple, references changes or things along those lines. So what I want to do in this video is actually walk through, and I've done this in another project already, and actually have in the second window, because I'm running a dual monitor mode. I actually do have this project, which is the Release Candidate 0 project, up and running in the another screen, and I'm gonna just use that as a reference and try to do as much as I can from memory. So the first thing that we need to do is to upgrade our Yeoman generator. So basically what we would do is do an npm, I think we do an I switch, and then you do a global switch, and then tell it for the Microsoft generator, and I think this is going to be SharePoint -generator, and then add latest version. Let's give that a try. I may mistype some things here. Yeah, looks like I mistyped something. Let's see. npm I. Oh, no hyphen for the I. Microsoft SharePoint -generator. No, generator SharePoint. So this is backwards, referring to my OneNote note here. So generator dash SharePoint at latest version, is that right? No, just at latest. So much for pulling this in from memory. Alright. Okay, got a bunch of errors. Why is that? Misspelled generator. Sorry about this. Okay. That seems to do the trick. Okay, so basically that's it. So you have to do an npm I-G at Microsoft generator SharePoint at latest, and that's going to download the latest and greatest. Now we have the Release Candidate 0 generator loaded. Now what this means for your existing projects, this will only be net new. So this will only, when I do a yo at Microsoft SharePoint, this is going to give me the latest package for that project template. So let's go ahead and try that. So if you've been following along, you know that I keep all of my code right off the C path, only because, typing this stuff in, you don't want a long path to have to create. And now I'm going to just do a make directory, and let's call this DC Release 0. And hopefully this is not a name I've used before. And then we're just going to change into that directory, DC Release 0. Okay, and now we just do our standard yo at Microsoft, spell it right, /SharePoint. And this should give me my Release Candidate 0 structure. And it's thinking, and hopefully this should load and we should be good to go. Okay, so what's the solution name? We want to call this, let's just call this Release 0. No, actually solution name, I'm not too much worried about. Current folder, yes. Web part name, let's call this Release 0. Description, I'm not worried about. No JavaScript framework. And then this should load and get us started. So I think what we're going to try to do, we're going to go through our same process of listing out all the listen libraries for a web. We want to expand this out to use web part properties to allow the user to specify the URL of the web that they want these listen libraries to be listed on. And then what we want to do this with the HTML structure, right? So we want to create a different layer, right? Separate out our classes, our module that's going to have all of our models that we use to hydrate the JSON return. We want to separate a module for the repo, and this is going to be where our business functions are, like get list and get site, get user, get items, or get documents, get my documents, whatever the case may be. All those getter setters, those types of functions that are business related, that's going to be part of our repo. And then we're going to have a view module that's going to do all of our rendering. So, just a render list, or, so it has the HTML. If you're going to use jQuery UI or something like that, we're not going to do that in this video, but that render module will have all of the UI components to that. Now, this is going to be more of a MVC model, whereas some of the latest stuff, especially like React and Angular 2.0 or Angular 1.5 or 1.5 plus, are going to use more so the component model. But I wanted to do this, one, because I'm very familiar with the MVC model type structure of code versus the component model type structure of code. I want to do that for this initial one. But I think later, this may be, maybe day 12, maybe the last one, or this current one, day 11. This may be the last one that we use a no JavaScript framework and actually dive into React. Part of me says that React may be the best framework for SharePoint Development Framework in this context versus Angular. And I'm still kind of struggling with that. One, because there is no Angular 2.0 samples out there. I heard that I saw a few blog posts and some conversation around they're having an issue with the app model, or the model, the module, the Angular module, and have a single instance of that to support a multiple instance type structure, which web parts are, right? You can have more than one web part instance on a single page, and I think there was some issue for the 2.0 conflict. So I'm actually hold off on that. I think I'm gonna get up to speed and sharpen my skills more so around the React framework for this type of development. Not saying that I'm just abandoning Angular altogether, but I think in this context, React may be the right way to go. Anyway, we are ready to go. So let's do a code.period. Initial launch open Visual Studio Code. And I think let's just do a gulp serve to make sure everything is connected. And then actually I want to show you something else that's new with, I don't know if that was drop 5 or 6 or if it's release candidate 0. But our Workbench, when we start to talk about the Workbench inside of the O365 tenant, they actually simplified that process to where we do not now have to go through the process of uploading a ASPX file to the default library, so on and so forth. Okay, so let me slide this over and then hit this. There's our R0. So far, everything is still intact. So as far as updating to release candidate 0 and everything seems to be working as expected, we have that, so we're good to go. Now what I want to do, let me pop into my, let's do the SPClassroom Workbench. So let me just go to the Workbench, and this is the one. SPClassroom is the trial, my O365 trial that I've been using in the previous videos. Okay, how far is this sign up process is going to? Okay. So I've been using the same trial in the previous videos, and we're just going to go and continue with this. If I can log into it. That's the thing, I changed my password. I have so many instances, O365 tenants, and test accounts that sometimes I get my passwords all screwed up. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, so I passed authentication. Okay, so this is the Workbench. And of course, you know, this guy's going to be here. There's no surprises there, right? Because we've been using this all along. But with this new release, now I can go to any site collection, right? It doesn't have to be my dev site collection. Put in, let me click here. All right. That's it. Underscore layouts 15 workbench .aspx. So if you remember like the old school on-prem SharePoint, where you had those app pages or those ASPX pages in the 15 Hive, that's where they kind of dropped the Workbench. So now for any site collection or any web or any sub-web, you can just put in this underscore layout /15/workbench.aspx, and you get access to the Workbench. And if you had, current web or page context, SP context, or anything like that, looking at the current web.url, this would be relative to that current web. And as a SharePoint developer and architect, you're kind of familiar with that model. So that's something that's new, right? And I can't remember if this was drop 6 or release candidate 0 of when they made that change, but that is now available, which is pretty cool. Okay, so now we're all set up. So we are good to go. Let me kill this one. I think the only two we really want here is going to be my local Workbench and my O365 tenant using the new Workbench.aspx under the 15 Hive. Okay, all right, so let's get busy. Let's go ahead and get started. So now, let me just slide this out the way. Let's see if I can cheat to kind of get these three, because I'm only working with these 3 screens. And I really am working with a dual monitor, and I love it. And I think that's, every SharePoint developer should be looking at that. Okay, so now, if you look under the source directory, web parts, this is all the same. No major changes here. If you go under the web part TS, this is pretty much, there's a few changes here that needs to be highlighted. So let me just close this Workbench. The first thing is you will notice that there's an import and then there's a version module, right? And that version module is being used here. And actually, when we do our HTTP clients, we have to specify. No, I don't think it's related to this, but now there's something else with the HTTP client where you have to specify configuration version. So we'll get deeper into that. So that's one major change that, now they're bringing inside this version module. The other change that I've noticed is that and I think this changed a couple of drops ago. Now, instead of doing the preview, we're doing the references against the core SP Web base. So that's one thing to be aware of as far as the reference. And they said that you can take one of your existing projects, like if you had a drop 3 or drop 4, and want to upgrade that project instance versus creating a new one to a release candidate 0 version. But there were a ton of steps. And actually in the documentation before they walk you through the turn of steps, it said, it's mentioned, I think Vesa mentions that it's probably easier just to create one from scratch and then redo whatever you were working on. And that's the joy, right? That's the promise of working with anything that's pre-release or in preview, that you may run into those different types of scenarios. Outside of that, I think those are the major changes. Now, what we want to do, let's go ahead and start building out a web part. And again, let's try to separate this out into a more of a MVC type model. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just go to the web parts folder. I'm sorry, this release 0 folder, do a new file. No, actually, I want to do a new folder, and let's just call this app. And within this app folder, this is where we want to keep all of our custom models, renders, and all this other good stuff. So let's just do a new file. Let's follow the same naming convention. So I'm going to just do release 0, and I'm going to just call this models.ts. Now, this is purely up to you as far as how deep you want to separate these out. In my case, for this simple example, I'm going to just put all my models into one module versus creating a new module for every model, right? So that's just something I'm doing. Yeah, it's a personal preference. I just think it's so much easier. So now let me just rename this one. I'm just copying and pasting files now. And we want to call this views. And then paste this in again. And let's call this guy our repo. And these are really just going to be our 3 layers. Okay, so again, models is just going to be all of our interfaces or models that we need to hold the JSON or any other custom business logic or entity that we want to pass around. The repo is going to be wherever our business functions, our getter and setters, any special business logic that's going to be incorporated into the repo. And then the views is the one that's going to spit out all of our HTML as we pass it in collections. And in our case, this is going to render out the the listing of lists and libraries. Okay, so let's get started with the views, and we just want to wire this up and test it out, make sure everything is working as expected. And as anything, we started with an export. This is a view class, so we're going to make this as a class, and then we're going to call this the views, for a lack of a better term. And basically, this is just going to be a list of static methods. So this guy is going to be public, static. Now, sometimes I get these mixed up. I don't know if it's static first then public, or if it's public then static. I think so far there's no squigglies, so I think this is right. Now we're going to say render. No, not render. We're going to say get list sample HTML. And that's just going to be a simple string return. And then we're going to return it list sample HTML. Very simple, right? We're going to take baby steps. Now, what's wrong here? How come it doesn't like this? Oh, you call it a method, so you have to put parentheses. Okay, baby steps, baby steps, baby steps. So let me go here, save all. And now, go down to my web part. Let's import that guy in. So if you're like me, I like to put all my custom imports at the end. So this is going to be import. And again, I'm all about discovery and trying to do things by memory. So what I try to do is use IntelliSense as much as possible. So in our case, we need to do, how do we make a reference to this? This is just going to be app / release 0 dot views, right? And in this case, we do not need the TS. And then if I come here in front of the curly brackets, this is not looking good so far. Okay, do I need a dot app? There we go. And then do a Shift Alt F, and that's going to give me my formatting. Okay, so now I have my views class, which is a static class that access to all my static methods. And I'm going to just use this existing HTML that they have here and basically create another paragraph tag without a style. So I don't need that style class, that style module for now. And then basically what I'm going to say is list render is, and then spit this guy out. Views dot get list sample HTML. So this will be my guy here. All right, very simplistic sample. But then again, all we want to do is just make sure that everything's wired up and there's no surprises. Okay, list render and then list sample HTML, so we're good to go. Okay, so this is wired, we're good. Now let's do something a little bit more challenging. So the first thing that we want to do, we want to go ahead and start to get our repo, our list data, right? And then we're going to start introducing promises and all this other good stuff. The render of this function is pretty straightforward because there's no promise, right? This is a singular call or an inline call, a synchronous call. So you can just render this out without any special, here's a promise data, let's make sure this promise is hydrated before we try to render yada, yada, yada. But now we're going to get into that complex scenario. So before we do that, what we want to do is just make sure we have our interfaces together. So let's do an export interface. And we're going to do iList. So if you recall, that, you know, the I list, let me do a capital I. The I list, you know, is just mainly there to hold the JSON that gets returned. And we're going to bring back the string, the title, and then the ID, or the GUID, which is a type string. Okay. Now, the other thing we need to do is to bring back the special list, right, with plural collection that uses the key property called value, and we make that an array of our core container, which is iList, our interface. Okay, and basically this is all we need when we're dealing with list data, the actual list. Now in the repo, this is where things get interesting. So let's go ahead and do our export, and this is going to be a class, and let's just call this repo. And again, we want static data, so this is going to be, static method. So get list sample, and then I'm going to just return this as a string for now. And then just call this someone's not happy. List data. Oh, actually, I have an extra. I just noticed the color from my single quote was not the color I was expecting, so I knew I mistyped something there. Okay, so get list sample here, and this is going to be pretty much standard, right? No surprises. And if we want to wire up this guy, this is really not a good example. I don't think we're going to learn anything new here other than just bringing in this repo class. And I'm a huge fan of copy and paste now. I think it's just which dealing with JavaScript, because there's so many opportunities to get things wrong. I think copy and paste is just going to save me. Okay, so now I'm doing the render of the HTML. Now I'm going to put also the render class, or render method. And then just do repo dot get list sample. No parameters. Again, another synchronous call. We're not dealing with promises, so we should be good to go. Pop over here to my workspace. No compile errors. List data. That's coming from the method. Okay, so we're good. Now, let's go ahead and get some real data. Now, the first thing we have to do, and this is where I'm going to have to go back to my cheat sheet because this guy is new. We have to bring in this special import class. So let me drop into repo. And this is a change for, and I believe this is a change for release candidate 0. Now we do an import. Now basically what was happening here is that they made a change with before we were using HttpClient. And basically HttpClient had to get, post, merge, and all those other HTTP verb methods part of it. And that's what we use to make our AJAX call. They since then flipped the script. Okay, so let's go here. Let's kind of take a look at what this looks like. They since then came in here, and then you would do this, and then it's is it context dot HTTP. So before we were using the HTTP client, and this was the one that was designed for SharePoint calls, and then we had another one called basic client or basic HTTP client that you would use for any other REST call, right? It wouldn't have the request digest and all this other stuff to do the auth token, all this other good stuff. So what they've done is they kind of flipped it. They said, you know what? Let's use that HTTP client as your generic call, non-SharePoint stuff, and we're going to create this new one called SPHttpClient that's going to be in line for all your SharePoint stuff. Okay, so this is the guy that we need to call now. But in order to bring that in, if I look up here, and I had to look at the sample documentation in order to to understand what was going on, because I was actually lost before, because it wasn't as far as this web part base, for some odd reason I couldn't get access to it. So in our case, because we're throwing this in another module that's outside of the web part that would just be used by the web part, imported through by the web part as an external class or module, we have to make reference to this SPHttp, and then we need to get access to the SPHttpClient, both the SPHttpClients there and the generic one is there, so they both are there. But you also have to have this SPClient options, which is interesting. Okay, so let's go ahead and kind of blow this out. So now when we want to create another public static method, and this is going to be the guy that goes and get our list data. So get list, and we need to pass it in a client. We're going to have the web part pass in their instance of the client, and that should be type SPHttpClient. We also need them to pass in the web URL, right? So that's going to be the URL of the web that we need to display all the data from. We still have this promise, right? And for now, let's, with this generic class, let's go ahead and make this a string, and we're going to change that, and this is going to be our method. Okay, so let's bring in our model, right? Because we need the iList here. So let's do an import empty curly for now from. Now I have to get this reference right. From slash single quote slash what do we call it? Release 0 dot models, and hopefully that reference is right. iList. No, that reference is not right. Is it dot models? Okay. And then list. So we need the plural form, right, with the generic collection. And then just, this is going to be our return type. Okay. So now we come through and do our client, which is our local variable for this method. Dot, and this is our get. All this is standard so far. The URL, so this is going to be the web URL, and we need to decorate that with the API calls. So underscore API web list. Okay, so now we made that standard URL into a REST API request URL. Now this is the configuration piece. Now this is and this is not optional, right? This is a required parameter. So basically we want this ISP HTTP client options dot, no. Okay, I'm confused. Hold on, I gotta refer to my notes. No, so this is, we don't need HTTP client options. So we need this HTTP client configuration. Oh, I know what I did. All right, so I explained. So we need HTTP client configuration. And this is going to be off the client. This is going to be off the client object. Dot configuration. Is that right? Oh, no. This is a static method off the client. Dot configurations v1, and this is in the sample, right? And I'm just using my dual monitor here and kind of cheating because I missed this step for that reason. All right, didn't understand this step. Okay, so now what we want to do, you have to return that, and it still have the double return, right? So you return and say, hey, we're going to make this AJAX call. Oh, and then we also need to return when the promise comes in, and this still is that weird delicate syntax with the multiple parentheses. And this is going to be response, right? So response object with the response type, close, right, curly bracket, close, semicolon. And then here you want to return the response object.json. And this is the magic method that hydrates this guy using the .value property, right? So let me do Shift Alt F, get this all formatted. Okay. And now everything's happy as far as squiggly braces, right? There's no squiggly lines here. So I think from a syntax standpoint, it's right. From a runtime standpoint, it's a different question. So we have this guy here, right? You know, we know how to add, you know, supplement, you know, these calls here in order to make this an AJAX call. And then, I'm sorry, REST API URL endpoint. And, you know, this guy is new. This is a release candidate 0, right? And sorry for the confusion there. I thought this was coming off the client, but this is just a static property or, yeah, static property off of the SPHttpClient class. I don't need this. Let me try to remove this. This is in my sample that's in my other screen. Let me remove this for now. I ran into an issue, and we'll get to that. I don't want to muddy the waters with something I ran into, and because that may not be an issue. I think I don't know, ran into a weird thing. So this guy I think is good to go, right? So, you know, this JSON is still going to, JSON method is still going to use to hydrate that guy. We got our endpoint, we got our new configuration piece, we got our new client class for our client object, and I think we're good to go. Still, you know, this is why we use the SPHttpClient versus the generic one, because this is going to get our request digest, make sure we authenticate it, blah, 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 blah. All right, so let's save all. And then, as you can see, my command window here, as long as I don't have any red text, I'm good to go. Everything is compiling correctly. And now what I want to do, I actually want to render this. So I actually want to see some data. I want to prove that that repo method works. So let's go. We want to stay within the render method of the web part, but we want to come after our DOM element in our HTML set. So basically what we want to do is come off this guy, do a repo dot getter get list, and now it's looking for the HTTP client. So we go to this dot context dot HTTP SPHttpClient. So we pass that guy in, and now we have to pass in the web URL. So that's this dot context dot page context dot web dot absolute. Okay, so we're just going to pass it to current, and now this is a AJAX call with a promise. So new line dot then, and this guy we still get the double curlies. I mean the double parenthesis. Basically just say, hey, use the repo, hydrate the response into this guy here, make it a delegate, empty object, semicolon. I always get tripped up. Like I had to practice this line here several times because I wanted to make sure I can do it by memory, because this is a repeat pattern, right? When you're dealing with promises, this is going to be a repeat pattern. And obviously I don't have all the pieces in it, right? Because I'm not doing any error handling or any chaining of error handling in there as well. So things there's additional pieces that are needed. So now I do the repo. So now this repo.value, this is going to be my array, and this is going to be hydrated. So I'm hydrated at this point. and I can do, so I can dump this into a local variable, just call this collection dot value, right? So my list collection of lists and libraries will be in this guy, and now I can do something with it. So what I want to do, I just want to spit that out here, and I'm gonna use the the jQuery or the element query type syntax. And basically what I'm gonna do is create a span. Actually, let's just put this in a new paragraph tag. And basically I'm gonna create a span, give it an ID, and I'm gonna call it list count. Right? And then in this guy here, I'm gonna take this dot dom element dot query selector, and tell it do the look for the ID list count, which is hashtag list count, and then set the inner HTML to this guy. And all I'm gonna do is just output the count. What's wrong? Hold on, let me cheat. I gotta look at this. Element.querySelector.innerHTML. I don't understand what the issue is. DOM element, what is it saying? Type number is not assignable. Oh, it has to be a string. Okay. List. That's interesting. List count. There. And now we'll force it to be a string. The beauty of JavaScript. Okay. All right. So hopefully this works. Yeah. So list count is here. All right. So let's save it. Let's come over to our Workbench. Now, local Workbench, this is not going to render anything, right? Because the local Workbench does not pull real SharePoint data. So let's go into our SPClassX, use the workbench.aspx, just hit refresh. Now we have to manually refresh. And then there's my list count 26, pulling real SharePoint data, which is awesome. Actually, it's pretty awesome. Okay. So now my REST API call is successful. I am getting data back. I do have a decent model on how to handle promises in a synchronous type method where I'm spitting that HTML. So now let's add in the view. So what we want to do is now take this collection and pass it to our view or our render method, and have it spit out or return us the HTML needed to hydrate this inner HTML. So basically what we want to do is go into our views, and I'm sure there's a better name than use views, because this thing is doing more than, we're treating this more than just like than a template. So let's create this guy, public static get list HTML, and this is why I call it get list versus render, because render, in my mind, I think that's a void, right? It doesn't return anything, whereas a get, you expect a value back. So this is going to be string, because all we're going to deal with is HTML here, and then we're going to return. Actually, we need a parameter, so let's make sure that we get in our list collection. So let's import that model. So import from release 0.models. No TS needed. And then now we just need the what? Why is it repo? Oh, IntelliSense is hurting me versus helping me. So iList. So we need the singular version of this, though it's going to be an array. So we're going to call this local variable collection, type it ilist array. Okay, and basically what we want to do is have a local variable stored in HTML. We'll set that blank for now. Return, let's just say HTML for now. And now what we want to do is to iterate through this collection. So there's a for each on top method within the array. Here's the weird syntax again. Item, we want to type that ilist. And then we want to delegate curly bracket, boom. And then, oh, it's saying that this type is, you know, get the spelling right, casing right. Okay, so now for each, now I'm free to write whatever HTML I need to write. So I can come in here and do HTML plus equal, let's just do single quotes for now. Just make this an LI. Let's close it. Right? And then I can do item.title. And that's going to spit that out. And now to make sure that this is, hold on, let me do Shift-Alt-F. All right, everything's pretty now. Now, okay, so that's all my collection. That's all I'm going to do. That's all I'm going to spit out the title for now. But I need to, actually, let's expand this out. Let's use the, and I forget the name of this character. This is the character on the tilde key. Backslash maybe? No. Apostrophe. All right. So this is that's the character on the tilde key, not the single quote. And basically what this allows me to do is do some much easier to read escape characters when I need to mix and match HTML and JavaScript. So let's do this guy. Let's just do a div container that's going to hold our entire list collection. And we need to do a UL, right, to handle our LIs. And then basically now we can do our $ curly brace HTML, and this is going to spit out all of our LIs, right? And that feels like that was too easy, but I think it's right. So let's go ahead and save this. Go back to our web part, and now in our promise, because we have to make sure we have a collection that's hydrated, we want to call this guy, actually we can replace this. Actually, let's keep them both. Let's create a new one. So we're going to have one span handle the count, and we're going to have another span handle the container or the list collection itself. And this guy, is it views? Views dot, oops. Come on, IntelliSense, help me out, help me out. Don't hurt me. Views dot get list HTML. Pass it in that collection, which is that local variable here. And that's all it needs. And we're good to go. Okay. So now we need to create a div to hold this guy. And then we just give it an ID list container. Right? Click save. Let's see how well we do. Make sure everything's saved. Come back to this guy. Manual refresh. And then let's see what happens. Amazing. You know, it's actually amazing to me how much of this I get right on the first attempt. Because Yeah, it's I'm humble brag, but I don't think it's me though. I think it's the tooling. I really do. I think it's the tooling. So yeah, I think the syntax is there, and a lot of things that would trip you up is really this weird syntax, like the dealing with promises, understanding that you're dealing with a promise in a synchronous type fashion, right? From a design standpoint, when you need to do this, like query select to say, hey, this is going to spit out this HTML. Um, so I need to understand that the HTML is going to get there before my data gets there, and then I need to append it or drop it in with the inner HTML, so on and so forth. Okay, so now let's go ahead and take this to another level. Let's go ahead and there's a couple things I want to show you real quick though, because I think the maintenance of this becomes very simplistic with this type of division. So say for example, if we're looking at this list, let's say, okay, we need to add ID to this list. So let's just go ahead and put ID in parenthesis right after the title. Okay, fine. So you just go into the view, right where you start to spit this stuff out, space, parenthesis. You know what? I can make this easier. Let me use this apostrophe type syntax, because I think with that apostrophe type syntax character, it makes this very simplistic to deal with in the future, because then you'll have to do those unescapes and concatenates and all this other stuff. So let's just do $ curly brace here, right? That's a property, right? So this still should work. So let me save this. Go back to this guy, hit refresh. Make sure I didn't break anything. Okay, so that looks good. So now, if I wanted to add the GUID, it's as simple as doing this guy here. Item.id. Save it. Right. So now, if you're working on the project, and especially if you're doing agile, right? You say, let's just start with this, just list it out. Oh, by the way, it'll be helpful if we had the GUID. So now you're just going back. I mean, this becomes a 10-second, 20-second change, right? You spend more time pulling up the project than you would adding the change in. And I think this model helps with that, because you're not seeking and you're not, looking at this single file and all this code and then trying to figure out what's what. And especially in the organization standpoint, if you adhere to this model, and I'm not saying the MVC model is the best model for this, right? Because the examples we're dealing with are very simplistic. All we're doing is taking data and listing it out. There's very little interaction, right? So you don't have to handle click events or chaining or any of those other complex scenarios that you have to take into consideration. So I haven't tested this up against that. But if you are doing something very simple, as far as like, hey, I just need to read this out, or I need to see my latest documents and provide a URL link to those documents, where it's not a click event, it's just an href. I think it becomes very, very simplistic. I think those models become very simplistic. Okay, so now let's do this. Now we add in the GUID, but the GUID is already part of the model. Let's add in a property that's not part of the model. So we want to add in a description. This is a string type. Okay, so now my model's hydrated. And now if I want to render description here, and this is why I love this apostrophe character, because I can now separate these out. Now if I just wanted to do a H rule and then display the description, I can do that very easily by simply adding the description here. You add it to your model, you add it to your view, you hit save, and then refresh, and now you got additional data, right? And this is all under the assumption that that data is being returned back with the JSON, right? Now let's take a look at the JSON. So let's go to Firefox. And the only reason why I'm bringing up Firefox is because I use the REST client add-in for Firefox, and I'm just not familiar with the one for Chrome. And I'm sure there's a ton out there. I just, this is the one that I'm used to. So now let me just take this guy here, come into Firefox, and again, in order to use this tool, I have to be authenticated. So it's going to, I have to go through the motion of getting an auth token, and this is going to store this in the browser for me. Let me just remember that. Okay. So now I'm here. Let me just copy this guy. Go to the REST client /_ API list. No, web then list. Web list. Add in my header. Hit send. Alright, and then hit the response body. Okay. So there, the one thing I am displaying, I'm displaying all the lists, hidden or non-hidden, right? So the hidden flag could be true or false. I'm displaying all of it because I'm not distinguishing or filtering those out using OData on my REST API endpoint URL. So now what I want to do, I want to bring this in. So I want to determine on this view here which one of these guys are hidden and which one of these guys are actually visible by the flag. And I can simply do that by going into my model, adding in the hidden property, but this is a Boolean, right? And how do I know that's a Boolean? Because when I look at the JSON, this is why it's important to be able to, I have a tool like REST client to where you can inspect this JSON, because this has a true false, and here's the digits. So that may be number. You can convert that over to string, but it's not in double quotes, so it's not a string type, right? So to even determine what the types are, you can use the ability to inspect the JSON will help you out on that, to understand what available properties you have by default before you have to expand or any of those other weird things that, when we get into site columns, you would see that we have to do. Again, the ability to inspect the JSON that's being returned is going to be important. Okay, so now we're going to do hidden there. Let's save it. And then if I go to the view, now I need to add a little bit of logic, right? Because now I need to say, okay, if item dot hidden, then let's do a, before we do that, let's do a hidden text variable. Set this to an empty string for now. If hidden is true, then our hidden text, we want to say that it's hidden. Maybe all caps. And then something special like this. Okay. And now I just go down to text right before I spit out the GUID. I can just do $ curly brace hidden text, right? Save this off. So now I have some conditional text display or wording based on a Boolean value on a property of the list or library. All right, so now that's hidden. This one's not hidden, so on and so forth. Okay. Now, I'm not going to get into the styling of this, but that's another thing you can do. You can come in here, you can add styles. I just show you very quickly how you would do that. You just come in here on the web part itself. You get this for free, right? When the generator creates this project, drop this into your view. Update the reference. I think that's a double period. Yep. So you have to go up 2 levels. update the reference, and then if you wanted to add a style, I don't know what styles are going to be available. Let me just try this out. Curly brace, right? $, styles, dot. Now these are the available styles. Let's just call this, I don't know. Just call it description. I don't know. I don't know what any of these look like because I didn't define them. Right? But anyway, that's where you define them. And then you just go in here, like as we did in the previous video, you just go into the the SCS file, and then start to do defining your CSS modules here. Ampersand include. Interesting. I have comment. Oh, fabric. Nice. Okay. There's a local variable that they're pulling in, a global variable they're pulling in. I'm not familiar what it brings to the table, so that's one change. Another change is this used to be all these defined classes used to be subclasses or subsidiaries to an overall class. They kind of removed that hierarchy, and this is pretty flat here. But yeah, you can come in here, you can add in a custom class. Not sure if you need this include or not. I mean, that's interesting. Maybe that's just for the fabric theme or styling. But I have to look a little bit deeper into that to really understand what's going on there. So that's the styling. Now let's just make sure we didn't break anything. We shouldn't have. I just don't know what style that class is going to give us. Make things a little bit larger, so that's good. So now let's do this. Let's right now this is pulling from the current web, and we want the users to be able to specify the web URL, and we want them to specify how many of these to bring back, right? So let's do this, and we can do that very easily through web part properties. Here's the web part properties section here under the web part module. Just simply come up here, copy this guy, because this is going to be a text field. This is exactly what we need, but we want to name it web URL, and then the label on it, we want to say web URL. And then because this is a text field, we need more than just this single line text here, right? We want more of a multi-line field to kind of handle something large enough to handle URLs. So that's a property on this, and we just call it multi-line. It's called multi-line, and I think it's just a true false flag. Okay. And because we defined this, we have to go into the props module and then let it know, make this part of the properties collection. So web URL, and it's a string type. Save it. And save this. And then if we hit refresh, we should see the definition of the property, though we're not using the property as of yet. So now if I go here, boom, there's our definition, and it's there. We can start to hydrate it out and all this other good stuff. So let's just copy this. And this is not going to do anything, right? Other than refresh, because it's reacting to every character or key down stroke. Okay. So that's not going to have any effect on this REST API as of yet. So let's do that. So in order to do that, we want to spit this out. Call me Nervous Nelly or whatever. But I always like to make sure things are doing what they are doing before I pass them as parameters. So all we want to do is take this properties dot web URL. It is super easy to do this stuff, so why not double check? Boom. Click it here. Web URL, that's our guy here. If we come up here and just call it sites, Deshaun, which may or may not be a real site collection, we can see it's being updated here. Okay, so it's responding, it's doing what it needs to do. So let's go ahead. Before we do that, let's go ahead and add an account. Now, add an account, we want to use the slider property. As far as properties, the default web project is only going to bring in the text field. So we need to come up here and bring in the slider property type. property pane slider, which is this guy here. Let's copy that so we don't have to guess on the spelling. Add a comment here, add this guy. The first thing we have to do is define the name. So let's just call this count. And then the second one is the properties, the object as far as like all the properties and labels and stuff. So this label, we just want to call it list count. And then this guy here, this type here has a min and max. So the max is going to be, let's just set this to 40. Min is going to be 1. The step is going to be the default. Let's just save this out. Hit refresh. Make sure this thing is working as expected. Okay. It's not spitting out. Alright, so let's go ahead and spit it out. Let me just do a line break here. List count. $ curly. This dot properties dot count. Oh, it's not here. It's not here. Why it's not here? You tell me. You're right. If you say we need to add it here to the properties, you're absolutely right. And this is going to be a string versus a number. Why? I honestly I don't know. I don't know why. When something is a string type or when something is a number or a boolean, I have no idea. Try one. If that doesn't work, try the other one. I kind of default to string though. Okay, so list count that's coming up is showing it as 3. If I play around with this, I see it 21, 33. Everything's matching, and we're good to go. Okay, now let's pass these guys into our method. So when we get back to the code, we can now add in the properties for our repo method. And basically what we can do is go into the, hold on, which one here? Oh, this the get list. So here, instead of doing the absolute URL, let's go ahead and replace this with the web part property. And then that would be the web URL. And then also what we want to do is send in the count, which is not part of the definition, so we would need to add it. So let's go to definition. And then just add in the count parameter. And basically with the count, all we're just going to do is leverage OData with the top command and then append the count. Okay, so let's save this. Go back to our web part, save it here. And now when we go back, hit refresh. So sites to Sean is not a valid URL. So if I go back to the root site collection and then change the count to 23, you can tell it's updating the list count here. Do something more noticeable like 3. It's interesting. It was selected to 3, but it sent 4, but now it's 3. So we got the list at 3. So the other thing to make this less chatty is let's remove the reactive changes for their properties. Now I always get this one mixed up. So the best way I know how to find this in any other overloadable method within the property, just go to this statement, react. So disable reactive properties. I'm gonna just copy this guy. Copy this, get rid of this. And then I can define this right above the render method. And this is going to be protected keyword, get method name, make it a method, return type boolean. And I only know this because I've done this several times already. And then return true. True to disable it. So now once that's set, we can come back to our tenant, hit refresh. Just thinking. Hopefully I've done everything correctly. Still thinking. Okay. So now when we go to edit property, the properties, as we make changes, we just get the apply button, hit apply, and then those changes are applied versus on every keystroke. Which makes things a little bit more stable. Okay, so that's it for this video. Just really wanted to kind of walk through some of the differences, mainly in the HTTP client, which is now the SPHttpClient in our context. We did not use, even though they added in this version, I haven't read up on how they're leveraging this as far as like parsing out or specifying 1.0, but that's something that I will have to take a closer look at. But everything for the most part is pretty much the same. Just create a directory for our app, right? So where we're storing all of our models, repo, and views. Again, this is a MVC type model, though I think the industry for this type of development is migrating to or gravitating towards more of a component model. And that's something that I will take a closer look at once I get into the React piece of it. So any questions, feel free to leave it in the comment section. I'm learning. I know we're learning this together, so I think it's really good to, if you run into a scenario or a situation that I just haven't come upon, we can kind of learn from that. Or, if there's something that is not clear that I didn't clearly define or discuss or explain in this video, it'll be good to kind of get that feedback as well. Okay, so that's it for this, and release candidate 0. I think we'll be using this for a while now. I think the promise is that within the next few weeks, I would say 4 to 6 weeks maybe, and that's just a guess, that this will be GA, and then we will probably have the actual first release. Okay, talk to you soon. See you in the next video. Take care.